Welcome back, sentient beings. Today, we will hear the data entry 883138 called The Dead Race by Mercury the Dealer. You can find the link to the original below, and let's begin. The galaxy is a dangerous place. It is filled with pirates, exterminators, deceivers, and a million other dangers that every empire must deal with. Our ancestors dealt with these problems much like we did, by thinking about themselves. Empires betrayed each other, went to war, made peace, forged and broke alliances thousands of times per day. Empires rose and fell, yet nothing changed for thousands, perhaps millions of years. That is until the monsters came. We don't know where they came from, or who or what made them, not even if they were made or just some sort of twisted natural force. All we know is that they fought our ancestors. Well, calling it a fight is not fair. It was more akin to beating a small child. The monsters glazed entire worlds, the leviathans so gigantic that they covered whole stars, the hordes so great they could cover continents. It didn't take long to all realize they couldn't stand alone against such monstrosities. And so, for the first time in recorded galactic history, all nations stood united against this enemy. The Tentarats rammed the ancient shipyards once more. The peaceful Fredalians, for the first time in millennia, prepared for war. People that were once sworn enemies marched, shoulder by shoulder, against their foes. The might of an entire galaxy, fighting the monsters with all they could. Our ancestors were sure they would not only win, but eradicate this threat. But in the end, they lost. The monsters didn't slow down, not even once they retreated, not even once they lost. It became evident that the godless things enjoyed toying with their enemies. Planets will be bombed for months, simply for the pleasure of seeing the population's will slowly crumble. And if the people ever grew too apathetic towards their suffering, they will stop the bombardment, to give a flicker of hope, which will be swiftly snuffed out by one of the monster's hungry leviathans. In the end, most empires broke, some in the hands of the monsters, some split in civil war, some simply retreated to the interstellar void. The remaining knew they could not win, but they had an idea. They could never kill monsters, but they could trick them. They made a new intelligent species. They were strong, not so they could defend themselves, but because it is more entertaining to fight something that possesses a challenge. They were fast, not so they could chase after the prey, but so they would be fun to chase after. They were made smart, not so they could build great inventions, but because prey that adapts never becomes too boring to kill. Empathy, endurance, determination, they gave that species a million of blessings, knowing that those were disguised as curses. Curses that would ensure that when the monsters finally reached Sol, they would stay there, toying with the poor creatures, just long enough for the empires to make a trap. They could not destroy the monsters, but they could imprison them. A cage was set with technology barely understood, gifted by even more ancient empires shortly before their too collapsed. They built a trap, and that species was the lure. In the end, the Alibari were the ones to name the species. They called them humans. Gaia is an ancient word for the Alibari. It is the name of the pedestal in which animals will be sacrificed, usually to give the city protection from evil spirits. a somewhat fitting name for the third planet on the Sol system. The planet was lush with life, though none of it was intelligent. Humans were sent to the planet with basic tools and weapons, along with schematics and cultural texts, as the ancient world filled the ship's servers with. Lastly, the ancients filled the planet with anti-air weapons, meant to activate once the monsters surrounded the planets. It wouldn't destroy them, but it would certainly slow them down. Then, humanity was left alone to entertain the coming beasts while the ancients made the final preparations on the trap. That day came. The monsters reached Gaia as a single massive fleet surrounded the planet, too drunk with anticipation to check for any traps. And, for the first time in centuries, the unstoppable march grinded to a halt. The planet's defenses shot against the fleets with all their might. Enough metal to build a moon was launched towards the beasts. Lasers as bright as supernovas melt through the flesh of the feared leviathans. Black hole missiles destroyed billions before fading. In the end, the monsters were broken but not destroyed. The remnants will still be enough to destroy their ancestors. Which is why, after the last of the projectiles were launched, the last of the laser batteries were tried, and the last of the missiles was activated, the Great Barrier came online. Hyperlanes were broken with experimental technology. Hundreds of layers of antimatter fields all activated in unison. Stars were forced to go supernova. A million pieces came together in perfect harmony to imprison the monsters inside. The ancestors slowly rebuilt themselves. A new era had begun, one that will surely bring peace and prosperity to all. Monuments were raised in celebration to the defeat of the monsters. Humanity became a symbol of honorable sacrifice. The great martyrs of the galaxy, a species that were promised would never be forgotten. But in the end, we broke that promise. It happened slowly at first. A few empires, but less effort in teaching ancient history. Some ours were born long after the monster's defeat, and thus didn't care about some ancient dead race. We had more important matters to teach after all: technology, politics, and war. Databases with human history were wiped, because why waste all that space for a dead race? Soon, things were back to what they usually were, filled with pirates, exterminators, deceivers, and a million other dangers that every empire must deal with. And like usual, all empires looked after themselves and only themselves. All things were as they should, until they weren't. The first to notice were the Prospect, a research station close to the Great Barrier, detected a small breach, normal in that region, except that instead of shrinking, this one was growing. Antimatter fields were set up in the region. They did nothing to stop the breach. More fuel was added to the ancient generators that also did nothing. Soon our empires found out about the breach. Panic and horror ensued. Some believed it was a natural occurrence due to the ancient generators finally failing. Some believed the monsters were back. Others had a million different theories. In the end, all we could do was wait. By the time the breach grew to the size of an average ship, we could finally see what was on the other side. And what we saw was death incarnate. Millions, maybe billions of ships, black as the void, surrounded the breach like predators, ready to pounce. Alarms were sent throughout the galaxy, as fleets were prepared and new ones were built, and sent for the battle at the breach. And for the second time in the galactic history, All nations stood united against this enemy. If the ancestors' defeat was akin to beating a child, ours was like beating a baby. As soon as their first ship passed the breach, it launched a single torpedo. A torpedo aimed directly at one of the ancient generators. We tried to stop it, but we failed. It swerved and moved too fast to be hit, and the few hits we did get were swatted like flies by its shields. Without the generators, the breach grew and grew until the fleet became completely visible. Billions of black shapes, many bigger than the biggest capital ships we ever built, moved in perfect unison towards us. A single message was sent to the capital ships of every nation present. We did our purpose. Where are the fathers? Panic invaded every admiral at the thought that the enemy somehow broke the encryption, translated their language, and sent a message in mere seconds of seeing them. Sad panic led to them firing upon the enemy with all they had. The void itself grew brighter than any star as the combined might of the galaxy fired upon the enemy fleet. They didn't even slow down. Another message came to the admirals. You are not the fathers. They launched another torpedo. This time it was aimed at the galactic fleet. Then the fleet signal went dark. The combined might of the entire galaxy was gone with a single hit. The beasts that passed through the breach were not the monsters of old. That was clear. The monsters toyed with their prey. They tortured and found joy in inflicting pain. The beasts simply marched on. They utterly exterminated any that stood in their path, always sending the same request to find the fathers. Many theories were made as to who the fathers were. None were conclusive. Hope dwindled as the beings split off into smaller but still gigantic fleets. Each one approached a different core world. We knew what that meant. Extermination. Across the galaxy, each core world sky darkened as a thick blanket of black smoke was released by the beasts. Some cried, some screamed, some laughed. We were all sure this was the end. A death by an unknown, uncaring and unkillable enemy. Then, like lightning in a storm, across the darkened skies of our worlds, our recording appeared. A strange creature, seemingly hairless in all but her head, stood in a dark room. Screens spread on desks and walls being the main source of light. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she spoke. This is High Speaker Eve Heiner today, the 9th day of the 11th month of the 50th year. Is a day of mourning for us all. The city of New June has been destroyed by the menace. They fought bravely, and thus the sacrifice will not be forgotten. May the fathers embrace them. Before anyone could process what had just happened, another recording appeared. This time it appeared to be a male. He was taller and had grey hair in his face. He spoke in a much deeper voice than his predecessor. This is High Speaker Carl Hawkins. I am proud to announce that today, the 17th day of the 6th month of the 90th year, we successfully exterminated all menace presence on Gaia. Humanity, stand once more but the enemy still lurks in the void. We conquered the land, we shall conquer the skies, for the fathers. The recordings went on and on, messages of great sorrow and pride, losses and victories. Slowly, however, the numbers of victories increased. The room where the so-called high speakers stood on became bigger, brighter. After the 400th year, it went from claustrophobic and dark to spacious and active. People walked and worked in the background. By the year 600, the room was now in space, and the background was a proud image of the planet below. The speakers kept changing dramatically too. Some clearly had synthetic augments, too advanced for anyone to even know what they did. Some were 10 feet tall behemoths of muscle, which were clearly genetically modified. The only thing that was consistent was the reference to the fathers. After 3 hours of silently watching the recordings, the skies became black once more. Moments later, a new face appeared. This new speaker had a thick blonde hair surrounding his face. His eyes stared into all, as if it could see and judge us through the skies. He spoke with a rough voice. This is High Speaker Jacob Herm today, the 30th day of the 12th month of the 15,000th year. I am... The man seemed to choke on his words, clearly trying to control himself. I am here to inform all that the fathers are no more. The words were met with confusion and despair. Confusion as to who the fathers were, and despair for what these beasts will do after discovering the supposed extinction of the fathers. The message continued. Our fathers may be gone, but our purpose stands. They made us to clean the universe of the evil, the menace, the monsters, and we have all served this purpose with honor, dignity, and diligence. The man's face changed to show enough determination that he might have ignited our planet by sheer willpower. He opened his mouth and bellowed. Our duty still stands. The menace lurks in the shadows of the galaxies, and we shall bring the light for the fathers, for the fallen, for humanity. The words echoed through the core worlds like gunshots. Many still had a vague idea of what humans were, mostly taught as footnote in ancient history, and the thought that this was the supposedly dead race made the blood of all run cold. It was clear they held a grudge for leaving them dead. They had just stated their intentions of cleansing the universe, and we were the first to go. They just wanted to let us know why. We all held our breath, hoping that whatever weapon they planned on using was at least quick. But they just left. All of them. At the same time. They just left. The skies went back to their natural blue or green or yellow. The ships that could destroy us all with a single firing of the guns all just went back to the Great Barrier. We tried talking to them a few times. They always just responded with the same message. We have a duty. Stand back. No one was stupid enough to try and stop them. We are just glad to be alive. The day they went back to the Great Barrier was met with mixed emotions. Some were happy that those things finally left. Some were angry that the beings who caused so much chaos were leaving unpunished. Scientists were disappointed that they wouldn't get to study the humans anymore. And admirals were concerned at the thought that the beasts could come back at any time. And they would be hopeless to do much. Many empires came together in the aftermath, somehow because of the fear of what lay behind our vision, some because they wanted to kill the humans together, a few because they were inspired by what humanity had achieved. It didn't last, of course. In a couple decades, all those alliances broke, each simply thinking about themselves, about pirates, exterminators, deceivers, and a million other dangers. Empires were born, lived, and inevitably died. The galaxy is a dangerous place after all, but there's still a constant. With every cycle, with every birth and death, the galaxies change. Scanners show galaxies brighten, as if a fog has been cleared, suns appearing where we thought only void existed. And we all know the reason. Humanity, the undead race, has been fighting the monster's darkness, and they have been winning. And with this concludes The Dead Race, written by Mercury the Dealer. If you like this story, you can go to his Reddit page and read more amazing stories of his. And as a reward for staying until the end, here's a fun fact. In 1974, Arthur C. Clarke predicted the internet of the year 2001. And lastly, if you don't want to miss new narrations, then why won't you subscribe and activate the bell? That's all, and stay healthy, guys and girls.